Jim, and I work as a scientist at Space Force Systems Center Pacific.
And today we're going to be talking about energy. So Jim, what is energy?
It's sort of a big question, but I think most scientists would say energy is the ability to do work.
Okay, now that's a little bit vague. Is energy going to be categorized at all?
Energy comes in different flavors, you're right. So let's name a few. And some of them we're sort of familiar with. There's heat energy, there's electrical energy, there's nuclear energy, chemical energy. There's energy of motion, that's called kinetic energy. And there's energy of its position in space, that's called potential energy. Let me give you an example. If I hold this ball, I have to pick it up, so I do work on the ball, that increases its potential energy, and I hold it here, so it's not moving, so it has no kinetic energy, so it's all potential energy, right? It has the potential to do work. Now if I drop it, it starts to fall, and it moves faster and faster and faster. So the kinetic energy is now increasing as the potential energy is decreasing. But here's the thing. The sum of the energies of all these different kinds of flavors is always the same.
Okay.
Fun fact, there's a law. It's a law of conservation of energy. And what it tells us is that energy cannot be created or destroyed. So it can be transformed. But if we add up all these different flavors of energy, it's always the same. Imagine at the beginning of time, there was a balance sheet and there was a number. That was the total energy. And through all these eons of time and all these transformations, if we still add it up, same amount of energy. Cannot be created or destroyed. The total.
Okay, I don't know about that.
It's the law, Jim.
Okay, well, I like to break the law. Okay, so you have your ball, right, and you drop it. It stopped. It didn't keep going. Why? The energy was destroyed, right?
Well, let's think about this. You started with potential energy, and if we call this zero, does it have potential energy? No. We saw it move really fast. Is it moving now?
No.
So it has no potential energy and no kinetic energy. That's correct. So what flavor of energy is it now? That's a hard question, and people thought about that for a long time. But it turns out some of the energy went into sound. You could hear it, that's not a whole lot. Some of the energy went into pushing the air around as it moved down, but that wasn't a whole lot. Most of it actually goes into heat.
So it was transformed.
It was transformed to heat. But if we add up all the energies, what is it?
The same. The same. Okay. Okay. So this is all actually really cool. But do scientists really study this?
In fact, Isaac Newton himself, right, the grand guru of science, studied this, and he came up with a name for describing how a ball bounces and how bouncy it is. It was called the coefficient of restitution.
Wow, that's super cool. Can you tell me more about the coefficient of restitution?
Yeah, it's sort of a big word, but when you think of restitution, you sort of think of restoring. So the coefficient of restitution is really telling you sort of a gauge of how much energy is being lost during the collision itself. So if you had a coefficient of restitution of 1, it would mean no energy is lost. So that's right. It would just if there was no air, it would just bounce completely back up to where it was before and would just go on forever, right? And that doesn't violate conservation of energy.
Yeah.
Right? Now, a coefficient of restitution of 0 means all the energy was absorbed in the collision. Like for example, in a hacky sack. If you drop a hacky sack, it doesn't bounce at all.
Yeah, no.
So a coefficient of 0 means no bounce. Coefficient of 1, perfect bounce. Anything in between is a bounce in between. And so where the energy is being lost, and that what the coefficient of restitution is describing, is on impact things deform. And if they don't come back to their original shape, or if it takes it too long to come back to its original shape, we lose energy. And the coefficient of restitution is sort of a gauge for that.
Wow, that's super interesting. Wow, that's pretty important sounding. Is there a title for this overall type of science?
Well, there's lots of titles, but for this case, it's sort of like sports science. And sports materials is a really big thing. Making different kinds of golf balls, making better tennis rackets. Can I tell you a story?
Yeah, I love stories.
All right, during World War II, because of the war, all the rubber was rationed. And so it was used for tanks and those kinds of things. So they used to, at the center of a ball, this is a professional hard ball, they would actually have a center which was rubber. That would make it really bouncy. But during the war, because they couldn't use that, they put in cork. And so what was happening during the war, the baseball players were realizing they weren't hitting as many homers as they did before. And they didn't think it was them. They said, well look, they changed the composition of the baseball. So what they did is they did a test just like this. They took 2 baseballs, one before the war, where it was the old baseball with the rubber in it, and one that had the cork. And they went in Chicago to Wrigley's Field, and they dropped the 2 balls to see which would bounce the highest. And what did they find?
The rubber bounced higher.
Absolutely. So the people during the war, they were at a disadvantage using those balls.
Wow, who knew science was so important to sports? Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Jess. Science is important for everybody.